Donald Trump is desperately trying to bury coverage of his scandals and failures, but it's not working. His Epstein cover-up has only drawn more attention, his tariff policy exposed his weakness, and now even Fox News is airing his humiliations. Things are so bad, MAGA media can't fully protect him. And it all started with his disastrous inflation poll numbers.
Let me just say, this is an abject disaster. Abject disaster for the President of the United States. You mentioned it, Jessica. Look, voters on Trump and inflation. He won the 2024 election because he was more entrusted on inflation than Kamala Harris was, led by a margin of 9 points. Look at where his net approval stands today, though, on inflation. My goodness gracious. Into the gutter we go, underwater we go. He's 25 points underwater. My goodness gracious. That is where the Little Mermaid is, and he is matching the Little Mermaid. That's how far underwater he is on the issue that got him elected. He led on by 9 points on it last year, and now he's 25 points underwater. As I said, this is a complete and total disaster for the President of the United States.
So let's look ahead to 2026 when a lot of all the House Republicans, some senators going to be on the ballot. How is that shaping?
Yeah, if Republicans in Congress think that they can escape the wrath of the voters when it comes to inflation, I have a bit of a rude awakening for them. Trust which party more on inflation? You go back to the 2022 midterms, look at this. Republicans led by 13 points on which party was more trusted in inflation. Look at where we are now. Nearly a 15-point shift in the Democrats' direction. It's within the margin of error, but the Democrats up by a point. This just looks totally different from where we were back in 2022 when, of course, Republicans took back the House. That's what Democrats are trying to do this time around, looking much better for them. The bottom line is the wrath that the voters feel for Donald Trump and inflation is transferring over to House Republicans and now Democrats, although it's a small lead, a big difference from where we were back in October of 2022, with Democrats actually in the positive and Republicans in the negative. Very much the reverse of where we were just 3 years ago.
Yeah, and so how do voters feel about inflation in terms of where it ranked and what kind of priority it is for them?
Right. So we started off this segment by saying that inflation was the reason that Donald Trump was elected. It was the most important issue for the voters back last year at this point. And look at where we are today. What is the top issue for you right now? It's a runaway. It's inflation. It's 34% compared to the economy, which is basically very similar at 16%, Medicare and Social Security at 14%. But the bottom line is voters in poll after poll after poll say that Donald Trump has taken his eye off the ball, off the big issue of the day, which is inflation, and that is why Donald Trump is way underwater on this issue, and it's why Democrats have caught up to Republicans on the all-important issue of inflation. I can guarantee you this, Jessica, if these numbers look right now like they do, or will look on Election Day 2026, there is no way on God's green earth that Republicans can hold on to the House of Representatives. These numbers, as I said, an abject disaster for Donald Trump and therefore Republicans.
I mean, I'm no Harry Enton, but 34 is
That's a big number.
More than double 16.
That is a very, very large number.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Trump keeps bragging that inflation and immigration, both of which he's now underwater on, won him the 2024 election. Voters once trusted him to lower prices, but the opposite happened. Beef costs have doubled, coffee is up 25% thanks to his pointless trade war, manufacturing jobs are disappearing, and tariffs have just become a middle-class tax. Now, people are furious, and Trump's furious that they're furious, insisting inflation is fake. Let's look at that before we get to how Fox humiliated him.
The message, I have to say that I think that these numbers were incorrect today. Not that they were horrible. I've seen much worse numbers than this, but right. I think that these numbers were incorrect today because nobody saw this coming. Nobody saw the smaller numbers not only announced, but going back and restating her numbers because she made a mistake. You know, that was the bigger numbers. So I think they're wrong. Very importantly, we have prices down. We have energy way down. Inflation is almost non-existent. It's way down from what it was. They had the highest inflation, really essentially in the history of our country. They say 48 years. I would say it's much beyond 48 years. The place was a mess.
June of 2022, it was over 9%.
Right. So
you left office, it was 1.4%.
That's correct. And now we have it down again. We brought it down. But prices are down. You know, when I hear the Democrats...
Nothing is more Donald Trump than calling obvious, everyday realities fake. He can invent immigration panics or crime waves in cities his supporters never visit, but he can't convince anyone their grocery bills aren't higher. Even MAGA diehards know prices are up. And when he can't spin it as a long-term benefit, it just backfires. Which is exactly what Fox highlighted when they shredded him this morning.
Breaking news right now, and a spike in the producer price level of inflation. Take a look. Markets are selling off here because the July PPI came in up 0.9%. Worse than the estimated up 0.2%. This is the headline number. It was expected up 0.2, came up 0.9%. Year over year, it is up 3.3% versus an estimate of up 2.5%. Now, when you look at core, it's also troubling because in the core PPI, it was up 0.9% versus an estimate of 0.2%. Year over year, the core up 3.7%, also higher than the estimated expectation, which was up 2.9%. These numbers have caused markets to drop. The Dow Industrial is down 105, the Nasdaq down 71, and the S&P 500 lower by 19.
Even Fox News is covering Trump's collapsing economy. That's how bad it's gotten. These numbers aren't abstract. They hit people in their daily lives. Democrats like Ro Khanna are pushing legislation to stop Trump's tariffs from making coffee 30% more expensive, while his trade war fuels inflation and tanks the economy. The man who warned about communist dictators is now running a state-controlled economy for his own benefit, enriching allies and fueling insider trading investigations. As Senator Chris Murphy shows, Democrats must hit back hard.
There's a lot I want to talk to you about. I just want to start with, I kind of just gave my overview of what I see as this dictator, aspiring dictator. When did we just start calling him a dictator? Actions that include everything from this effort to militarize our nation's streets, including the city that you and I spend a lot of time in, to go after private sector companies and try to control them, even to control the Smithsonian and institutions and what our history looks like and rewrite that. But how do you see this moment that we're living in and all of those Trump actions together?
Well, I think you've identified the real danger here, which is that the president of the United States is essentially operationalizing the White House and the vast power of the executive branch, an executive branch that, frankly, is more powerful than it was a generation ago, in order to compel loyalty from the businesses that he regulates and the citizens that he governs. And the founding fathers were very worried about this, right? They had watched the British king, for instance, use the power of the treasury, use the power of taxes and tariffs and levies in order to keep an entire people subjugated. And so they created a division of labor in the federal government. And specifically, they gave the powers of taxation, tariff, and spending to the Congress and said, listen, it's up to the Congress, the branch of the government most rooted in the people, most connected to the people, to decide how money gets spent. The president is part of the executive branch because all he's supposed to do is execute the decisions that Congress has made. And so what is most worrying is that this Republican Congress has just outsourced the power of tariff, taxation, and spending to the president. Mm-hmm. And as you said, he is right now, as we speak, using it to crush dissent, for instance, pulling funding from colleges where there are anti-Trump protests, and compelling loyalty from the private sector to make sure that they line up and do his bidding. So, this is a creeping totalitarian state right now. It is not too late to stop our democracy from imploding, but we can't assume that if we just continue to play politics as normal, that we are going to end up with a free and fair election next November. This is happening really fast, and it's literally the playbook that our founding fathers worried about.
We're in such a unique moment. You've called this out so often, which I very much appreciate. And it can't use the same tactics. They're just not going to work. And you've worked in a bipartisan way many times in the past. I've known you a long time. I mean, to address gun violence prevention, to try to negotiate a bipartisan border deal. You're not somebody who has shied away from trying to find a bipartisan solution. But you are now going all in on boycotting negotiations regarding the government funding bill, which I think is very interesting, a very interesting tactic to take. That is a September 30th deadline for people who are just tuning into this. most Democrats in your caucus, or you tell me, are not exactly in the same place. So why did you decide to choose this fight as one to take on?
Well, there was a headline today suggesting that I was boycotting discussions around the upcoming budget. That's not true. I'm simply saying that, Democrats have to come to the table with values. And we shouldn't give our votes away to funding a totalitarian state, right? Right now, the government is lawless. The president is not paying attention to the words that are written on the budgets we pass. And so if we're going to pass a budget and if we're going to provide Democratic votes, well, then, that budget has to actually be implemented. There has to be provisions that require that the president continue to live up to the law. And yeah, we wouldn't also be doing our job if we didn't put on the table some things that are about to happen to people in this country that are going to destroy their lives. Our healthcare system is about to go into meltdown. Premiums are going to go up for millions of Americans because of what happened in the previous partisan Republican budget bill. We have a chance to stop that. And this funding bill that we're going to debate in September, it's an opportunity to try to trim the lawlessness, but also to try to help people that are going to be screwed by the Republican attempt to throw people off of their health care. So I'm not boycotting anything. I'm just saying that we should fight as a party. And we should say to Republicans, no, we're not going to give you a blank check with our votes in order to fund a state that increasingly mirrors the kind of authoritarian regimes that we have fought against all over this world.
Yeah, and look, I'm glad. Thank you for the clarification on the boycotting. And that's a little, headlines are always a little off sometimes. They're not always, but sometimes they are. So thank you for that. But I think it's interesting. The reason I wanted to talk to you about it is because the way that it was approached by Democratic leadership in the spring was pretty disappointing. I mean, that was my view. There wasn't a huge fight back. It didn't seem that way. So what does the fight back look like this time? Because this is a stake. Republicans need Democrats to be a part of this negotiation to move it forward and keep the government open. So how does that work, and what does that look like to fight back?
Well, listen, I obviously, did not provide my vote for that, budget in the spring. But I understand that was a moment where the country was still, kind of shell-shocked by the way in which Trump was starting to seize control of the government. That was before Republicans passed their own budget bill that threw 17 million people off of their health care. The stakes now in the fall are, I think, just a lot sharper and a lot brighter than they were in the spring. If we don't start to write some provisions into these budget bills to stop Trump from acting unconstitutionally, if we don't restore some of the health care that's being lost, we are going to have a democratic and moral disintegration of this country. So I think the American public are sort of up for a fight over values. And, I think my colleagues understand that, at some point we have to draw a line. At some point, the president has gone too far. For me, it was months ago, but maybe what has happened this summer, in particular what's happening in D.C. right now with the militarization of the nation's capital, will be enough for people to say, all right, this is a moment where we should fight to protect democracy.
Let's certainly hope. It's certainly made some damaging and bad progress in the part of the Trump administration in the last couple of months. Senator Chris Murphy, thank you.
We need to keep pushing this fight forward. I don't want to hear leaders in Congress saying they have no power. You were elected to represent people, so use your platform and your voice. Every day, we're here speaking up, organizing, and sharing the truth, even without holding office. If we can do that, elected officials should be doing even more. Many of us care deeply, and at times it feels like we care more than those in power. It's not a criticism of those who are speaking out, like Senator Chris Murphy, but a reminder to the rest to step up and do the work. We'll continue bringing you this conversation every day on this channel. If you'd like to support what we're doing, please subscribe, leave a like, and if you watched until the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. And until next time, I will see you soon.